for this section, and I'll be in the background. And I might turn my camera off in case I cause some. You don't want to see my picture. Okay. So Chris, I'll let you have a chat to Simon and take it away.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mr. Shaw, and hello, Chris, and hello to our students. It's a privilege to be able to have this global classroom breakout seminar with such a bespoke group of students. Chris, we've got quite a good cohort of students here, ranging from A-level P students that are going to be asking around physical of sport.
That sounds good. Sounds good.
And then some of our athletes that are runners themselves as well. But I'm going to be really cheeky, if that's all right, Chris, and I'm going to kick off with the first question. And
Jump in, Simon.
I teach students from year 3 years old to 18 years old, and 3 years old absolutely love running. They love to play. They love it all. Physical education, absolutely love it. But on that journey towards adolescence, somewhere on that journey, they tend to lose that love for running. And I'm just curious, do you have any answers as to why you think that might be, or anything we can do to reignite that love?
I'm really curious about that myself, and I wonder about it a lot. And I have a couple of exploratory answers. One is maybe what we do is when we start to make things obligatory at that age, naturally there's going to be resistance. You tell any 12 or 13-year-old to do something, their first reaction is, that's the last thing I'm going to do. So that might be a problem right there, making something obligatory at an age when people don't want to be told what to do. So my first option might be to say, you know what, don't make them do it. If they don't want to do it, don't force them to do it. Because again, when you start to associate it with a punishment, with a negative physical activity, you're kind of planting that seed in someone's mind that could last with them for a long time. And then my second thought is, maybe it's not the running, it's the context of the running. So, if you had them out there chucking a Frisbee around, or say, like, you know what, there is an Amazon gift card buried somewhere on this soccer pitch. First kid who gets it has got 50 pounds of iTunes in your pocket. Something like that. If you can turn it into play. The Tatamata have this game they do, which again, I think is kind of genius. What they do is they don't actually just go out and run the way we do, where you sort of draw a line and say go and everyone tears off. They form into these teams, and each team has a ball, and you progress the ball by kicking it along. And you don't go from point to point, you go back and forth. So you may mark something off about 100 meters away as a turnaround point. And so you may have a team of like 4 kids, and they'll have about the size of a cricket ball, which is not that easy to kick. And so each team has their own ball. So you've got to keep track of your ball. So now you have 2 teams. Let's say there's 5 kids on each team with 2 balls, or 3 teams with 3 balls. You got to keep track of your ball. And the balls are getting confused, and the teams are getting confused. That mayhem is fun. And you got to get to the turnaround point. And once you're at the turnaround point, you got to kick the ball back the other way. So if you happen to be not the fastest runner, you're lagging. But when that ball turns around and comes back your way, at that moment, you're in the lead. There's this brief shining moment where you're the first person on the pitch. So things like that. I think where we always run into problems in life is when we insist stubbornly on doing things our way, instead of saying, look, let's just find out what they want to do. And with us in particular, that was my lesson of running with a donkey. Again, you will never stubborn a donkey. A donkey has had hundreds of thousands of years of learning how to win an argument. And so what we learned is, you pull on a donkey's rope, you lose. If you get the donkey excited and figure out how to do that, you'll win. And I'll just give you one last example. So I was actually out running one day in the woods in a place called Charlotte, North Carolina. And I was out with a friend of mine from down there. And this was after a couple of years of me having trained my donkey to be a running partner. So while we were on our run in the woods, we came across a woman with this big dog. And clearly, both of them were very frustrated. The woman's face was kind of red. She looked tense. The dog was kind of pulling at the leash. And we stopped to chat with her. And she said, I've got this dog, and he's hyperactive at home. He's always chewing the furniture. I want to run with him, but he's terrible. He's like the worst runner. He's all over the place. And so I said, if you don't mind, can we just try a little experiment? I'll show you what works with my donkey. So what we did was we had the woman tighten up the leash, get very close to the dog. We put my friend in front and I got behind the dog. So the dog was really essentially surrounded. And then we just started to run. And the change in this dog's behavior was miraculous. Like instantly the head's up, eyes forward, ears back, and it just flowed along with us. And I think all we did was we taught the dog, hey, this is what we're doing now. This is just what is on the agenda for this moment. And the dog was completely down with it. So the longer she pulled on the leash, the worse it was for both of them. The second we could turn it into something that the dog found fun, triumph. It all worked out.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks, Chris. Great answer. And I suppose that links to doing something that you like with your friends and with people and having that connection and not just on your own. So thank you for that. I'm going to head over to Molly, who's one of our A-level English students. And I think she's interested in asking you about the writing process. Molly, if you can turn your camera on, do you want to turn your camera on and your microphone on and ask Christopher the question?
Thank you, sir. And it really won't let me turn the video on. I'm really sorry.
Oh,
but thank you very much for coming and talking to us today. And I mainly wanted to ask about how you go about translating your experiences and your inspiration from the world onto paper and the whole writing process.
It's both harder than I thought and easier than I thought to write a book. I had started gradually as a writer. My first job was with the Associated Press, writing news stories. And Associated Press news stories are very short. They're only about 5 or 6 paragraphs at most. So you learn when you only have 5 paragraphs and you have to describe, for instance, a battlefield scene in southern Angola. You only have 5 paragraphs. You learn to kind of get to the point pretty quickly. And that was very useful for me because you really have to focus not on the pretty words you feel like using, like the word limb, L-I-M-N. I love that word, limb. It just means to make something light up. It's a great word. I never say the word limb. I've never used it. I'm not even sure how to pronounce the word limb, but I like it, but I never use it conversationally. And whenever I try to use it in writing, it comes across as phony. And so what I started to learn is when you're writing a 5-paragraph story, don't try and look for the opportunities to use the fancy word that you've always wanted to use. What you really need to focus on is who is the person you're talking to, what is it they're interested in, and get outside of what you feel like doing and get inside the mind of the person who wants to hear this story. So I learned that lesson as a news reporter. And as I started to graduate into longer and longer forums, as I began to write magazine stories, which are about 2,000 words, and then of course, like the great, lunar expedition of writing a book, which is 100,000 words. What I kept reminding myself is, what story am I trying to tell? Who am I trying to tell it to? And even though these sound like basic questions, they're a little bit complicated. So with Born to Run, this is the first time I sat down to try to write a long, complicated book. And I did a terrific job of ruining it from the start. My first draft, my first 100,000 pages, 100,000 words, after a year and a half of working on it, I turned it into my editor, and he called me the next day and he said, I think we should probably consider starting over. Tear it up, begin from the beginning. And my first reaction was like, I'm going to go to jail for murder. And then my second reaction was, he's completely right. Like, I knew he was right because I was just trying to tell too much. So what I learned to do was, again, focus on this. Whose story is it? For Born to Run, it's really Micah True's story. It's his book. This is a guy who had an idea, he had a challenge, and he brought it to fruition. So really, the beginning, the middle, and the end is really Micah True. Once you know whose story it is, you figure out, okay, what's the beginning point? With Micah, it was his idea. I want to do this race. What's the middle? He actually gets some racers down there to do the race. And then the end is he has the race. You chart out those 3 points. And what I would do, and it's a super useful thing, I'm not a big fan of outlines. I like to see things. So I got a big chunk of cardboard and I slashed it into a graph, like a grid. And so, okay, I got my beginning, bam, that's there. I got my end, bam, that's there. I got my middle, there. And so on the grid, I put the beginning. Caballo gets an idea. I got my end. Caballo has a race. In the middle, Caballo gets some racers. And then as I worked along, whenever I would get some more information that I wanted to include in the story, I would look at my grid and say, all right, does this fit or not fit? Because I may have discovered the secret of a brand new form of Coca-Cola that's better than the old form of Coca-Cola. But on my grid, there's no place for formulas for Coca-Cola, you know? So chuck it out, stick to things which actually fit the story. So I hope this answered your question, because I just realized I was just talking myself into a spiral. So if I didn't answer your question, please ask it again.
No, that was really interesting. Thank you very much. And I'll pass it on to the next person now. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Molly, and thank you, Chris. And I suppose it's like you mentioned in the global classroom, start at the start line, and as soon as you get to the start line, you'll see the finish, won't you? So thank you, Molly, for the question, and thanks for that great answer, Chris. I'm going to pass over to Jacob, who's another one of our English A-level students. Jacob, you can turn your microphone and your camera on. That'd be great.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
All right. Hi, Chris. As someone wanting to study journalism at university, I just wanted some kind of insight on how you had the bravery to communicate your experience as a war correspondent.
That's a really good question, because I think one thing you learn when you're covering conflicts is that what you say really matters. You know, a lot of times you're writing something, you're writing an essay, you're writing an article. You know, if I do a film review, you know, it doesn't really matter that much. The director of the film might be angry, but it's not really affecting the flow of events worldwide if I do a negative review about the Shawshank Redemption. But when you're writing about conflicts where people's lives are affected, where, for instance, United Nations humanitarian aid may or may not go to a country based on the UN's perception of what's happening there, your words really matter. And so I think the only courage you need is the understanding of the compassion and humanity you have to have. And I think for me, that was a terrific learning lesson early in my career. I actually got myself in over my head, because covering foreign conflicts was among the first kind of writing assignments that I had. So I was kind of starting a little bit deeper into the challenge than I should have. But it taught me a lesson that hopefully I have brought to my work since then, even on things which seem much less important, like a book about running or about donkeys, that you understand that even though it's just a tale or a yarn for you, for somebody else that you're writing about, this is extraordinarily important. And you have to take the time to really understand them. So I'll give you a quick example. So in Born to Run, there's a character, a guy named Barefoot Ted. Now, during our entire adventure with Barefoot Ted was driving me crazy. The guy's a talkaholic, he's antic, he's manic, he's a goofball. And Micah True and I both had the same reaction. Like, we both wanted to push Barefoot Ted off a cliff. And I happened to notice, though, that other people in our small group really liked him. You know, like, there's only Micah True and I that were just annoyed to the point of murder. Everybody else really seemed to have a good time. And so I had to reflect a little bit and thought, all right, well, what's going on here? Like, why do these guys all like Ted and I'm just, you know, bugged to the point of insanity? And so I decided I got to really learn about this guy. And so I break him off from the group and I would talk to him one-to-one. And after the first adventure was done, I actually traveled out to California, spent a few days at his house. And over time, Ted still can get under my skin in a way that's just maddening. But I've really grown to love and appreciate him. He's a genuinely good-hearted guy. And so I think that became a lesson to me, is that always take a step closer to the person you're writing about, try to understand them on their terms, and look around you and see whether your opinion is universal. Because somewhere out there, there's somebody else who disagrees with you. Get that person's viewpoint and you're getting a step closer to really understanding what you're talking about.
Oh, brilliant. A great story, Chris. A really good lesson. So thank you for that. And thank you, Jacob, for the question.
Thank you very much.
To Layla, who's one of our A-level PE students. Layla, have you got your question?
Yes, I was just wondering, do you have a favourite place to run?
Yeah, it changes, Layla. I used to say my favorite place to run was my own backyard. You know, wherever I go out the door, and because I knew where I was going and I knew the routes. And what I've found now is my favorite place to run is a place I don't think I might be able to get to. So I like to sort of set a little challenge for myself, like, hey, you know what? There's this pastry shop. It's about 15 kilometers away. If I can get there, I deserve a pastry. So I like to set these little mini challenges for myself. So that becomes my favorite place to run. Something that's a little bit unpredictable, something I'm not sure about, and something that offers a fresh challenge.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chris. I like the idea of giving yourself a bit of a treat at the end of the run. That's always a nice idea.
Yeah.
Amelia, have you got your question?
Hi, Chris. For me, I'm quite a sporty girl, so I'd like to know from your research, from what you've learned, do you have any desires to work with like a footwear brand or anything to produce shoes that can help today's athletes run better?
Hey, Amelia. So I'm a big footwear skeptic, a big footwear critic, because, you know, one of the revelations to me, I came out of a culture where it was always about the right trainers. You know, you have to have the right trainers. You got to go to the specialty running store, and you walk into the specialty running store and you have this like bewildering wall of footwear and motion control and anti-pronation. And if you buy the wrong one, you're going to get hurt. And I grew up thinking this is all true. And then I get down to Mexico and I meet people who are far better runners than I am, and they're barely wearing anything. If they're not barefoot, they're just wearing a little pair of sandals. And maybe really question the importance of footwear. And then when you look back through the history of human evolution and you realize we didn't have footwear, fancy footwear for millions of years. We just got by with the minimal. We've not become better athletes because of better footwear. I think in some ways, fancy footwear has taken us the wrong direction. So I've really learned a lesson from my now friend, Barefoot Ted, which is I try to run with the least amount on my foot as possible. There's a company in the UK, Vivo Barefoot, that has become huge advocates of this philosophy. I should say right off the bat is that I never aligned myself with any footwear company, and I stayed away from that because I want to be free to be as cheeky and skeptical as I want. And so if I were like business partners with Barefoot Ted, then I would be undermining my credibility. It would seem as if I'm trying to sell his sandals as opposed to really stating my mind. So I can say Barefoot makes his own line of barefoot running sandals. I wear them all the time. Vivo Barefoot makes terrific minimalist shoes. I wear them all the time. Any footwear that offers as little resistance between me and the ground as possible, that's what I'm a fan of.
Right, great, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Chris. I'm going to add a bolt on to that, if that's okay. I know as you look back in time that things change, and sometimes we look back and go, why on earth did we do that? So why on earth did we not let women run a marathon? And do you think in 100 years' time that we'll look back and go, why on earth did we wear trainers?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And you see it happening. Well, it's funny because, so surprisingly, one of the groups that was really instrumental in leading this march on minimalist footwear was actually Nike. Nike came out with a trainer called the Nike Free back in, I don't forget what it was, 2004, 2005. And the reason why was because Stanford University has an amazing athletics program, and they were sponsored by Nike. And a couple of the Nike salespeople were visiting Stanford one day, and they looked at the athletics team, and they're running around in bare feet. And they went to the coach and said, we just sent you a truckload of Nike trainers. How come nobody's wearing them? And the coach said, I don't know why, but when my athletes go barefoot, they tend to go faster and have fewer injuries. So the salespeople brought this information back to Nike, and the Nike scientists started to do some research. And they realized, yeah, actually, you look at cultures where they have minimal footwear, and they tend to be less injured and better runners. So they developed a trainer called the Nike Free, which instead of it being a narrow toe box, it's a very wide toe box. Lets your toes splay out. Instead of a thick heel, it had a very narrow heel. And all it really did was provide a little bit of protection for your sole, but none of that correction that is involved in so much other footwear with the motion control. And so here's what Nike did. I'm not sure if it still exists on the internet, but Nike produced a commercial for the Nike Free, which was amazing because it was a series of quick cuts of different kinds of athletes. It was ballet dancers, martial artists, divers on a springboard, gymnasts, wrestlers, kung fu fighters, and they went volleyball players, and they went from sport to sport to sport very quickly. And you realize almost all of them are barefoot, or they're wearing almost nothing on their feet. And what it taught us was really the only people who are wearing heavy shoes are people running long distances. But on a soccer pitch, you don't want a big heel, you don't want a lot of cushioning. You want as little as possible. So I think what is we are in a state now of self-correction. We are getting back to that strength in minimalism in a lot of ways, and in particularly with footwear.
Oh, thank you for that. That'll be very interesting. If in our lifetimes it'll be the norm not to wear footwear. I'm going to head over to Grace now. Grace, do you want to ask your question?
Hi. Can you hear me? Okay. So obviously your writing has had a lot of acclamations from biology professors, particularly for the science behind your writing. So I was wondering, from like a writer's point of view, how did you ensure that your book was scientifically accurate?
Oh, that's a terrific question. So I was never a good science student growing up. This is something that I just try to survive. I just try to get my way through my science classes as painlessly as possible. So it was always my weak spot, particularly as a writer. I never felt comfortable. So I did two things to make myself feel comfortable in my books that I had the science right. Number one was I had this little mantra: no science without a scene. If I couldn't get into the lab, if I couldn't be there with the scientists, then I wasn't going to write about it. I wasn't going to sit down with some peer-reviewed study and try and figure it out for myself, because guaranteed I'll mess it up. And so if you look, particularly in Born to Run, I'm in the lab with the scientists. And when you're face to face with somebody, they know when you don't know what you're talking about. So if I'm talking to Dr. Lieberman, for instance, and he's explaining something, and I get that look in my eye like, I'm trying to pretend, but I am lost, dude. I'm out to sea. They can pick up on that, and they would explain it. And then the second thing was, you know what? Just be humble. Show up and be the dope in the room. I would go into these labs and make it very clear, I'm out of my depth. Take me by the hand. And people who are passionate about what they do, they love to explain it. And so you're not offending or wasting someone's time if you ask them a well-intentioned question about what they're doing. And so what I found is, even though I am talking to scientists who are at the very top of their fields, if I ask them a good-hearted question, they're very happy to go right back to the beginning and lead me by the hand to the point of understanding and illumination. Essentially, what I did was I would go to the source, I would talk to the people, I would ask questions, and then during the writing process, the same thing. Whenever I didn't understand, circle back, ask again, until I felt confident that I was explaining it in a way that a dope like me could understand.
Thank you, that's great.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Grace. Chris, I'm going to head it over to Ava, and I'm going to embarrass her a little bit here. Ava is one of our top cross-country runners, and I think she's actually in the top 5 in the country for her 800-meter time. So I think she's going to ask you a question about some speed. Over to you, Ava.
Thank you. So obviously, as Mr. Warburton said, I'm a very passionate runner myself and specialising in the track. And I was wondering, what's your definition of a successful athlete?
Wow. Okay. I've got to process that a little bit. So I think that my honest answer is one that most people will look at me and discredit me as an authority when I say it. I think competition has been so overrated. We get so focused on winning and beating and surpassing that we don't look at two things. We don't look at our own well-being and happiness and health, and we don't look at the people around us. We just get focused on the number or the tape, and to the exclusion of the humans, including ourselves. And so I feel uncomfortable in some way sharing that with a young athlete like you, because you are in the prime of your health, you're killing it, you've got only more achievements ahead of you. And so for me to say, no, it's not important, focus on your brothers and sisters and not on, college scholarships and the Olympics, it sounds ridiculous, and maybe it is. But I think, to me, a successful athlete is someone who goes to bed and is asleep within 2 seconds of their head hitting the pillow and wakes up in the morning and can't wait to do it again. I know a lot of athletes later in life whose stomachs are just churning with anxiety, who are unbelievably successful. I'll point to a good friend of mine named Amelia Boone. She is a world champion obstacle course racer, the Spartan races world champion. But she has struggled secretly with unbelievable anxiety and doubt. And when you look at Amelia Boone, she's a lawyer, she's an athlete, she's wonderful in every way. And you would never guess that beneath the surface, there is so much turmoil going on. So to me, a successful athlete is not really measured by the records or the awards. It's by that sense of the sport is enhancing that athlete's life instead of tearing it down a little bit.
Thank you so much. That was a really great answer.
I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you, Ava, and thank you, Chris. I think in life at the minute, especially with our professional athletes, we kind of teach them that they're going to have to expect to go through pain and trauma to be successful. But I think you're teaching a very different message, one of people and connection and a passion, aren't you? I think that's a great message to push forward, and not the one that some of them get, that it's all about having that determination and going through the pain and pushing through the pain. So thank you for that. We're going to head over now to his brother, William. William, do you want to ask your question?
Oh, hi. What inspired you to write your book, Born to Run?
Hey, William. So I think the inspiration for the book was, again, this mystery of why people could do things that I couldn't do. So when you look at the world around you and you see people doing stuff, to me, if someone can run a marathon in just 2 hours, I got to ask myself, either genetically they're different than I am, they're like got some kind of alien Martian space DNA that I don't have, or they're genetically the same as I am, they're just doing something differently. And so when I learned about this group, the Tarahumara, and saw that they're like 80-year-old guys who are running 200 kilometers and just like eating a little bag of corn, they don't need power bars and they don't need specialty shoes. It was the same question. Either genetically, they're just different than I am, therefore I have a pass because I can't compete with them. Or they're genetically the same, but they've learned something that I haven't learned yet, in which case I don't have a pass because there's nothing stopping me from learning what they've learned. And that became the genesis of Born to Run. When I realized that the Tarahumara are physically the same as I am, then the only answer is, okay, they just got something figured out that I haven't figured out yet. And if I can figure it out, then maybe I can share that with a lot of other people. And I think the success of the book was from that realization. I think a lot of people hate running and want to like it. A lot of people look at running as a punishment for pizza, but what they really want to do is they really want to have some fun. So if you can explain to them in a way that, hey, man, you can enjoy this. You don't have to dread it. And that's the secret people are looking for. How can I have fun at this?
Thank you.
Thanks, William.
Brilliant. Thank you, William. Thank you, Chris. And then we're going to move to our last student, Aidan. Would you like to ask your question, Aidan?
Good evening, Mr. McDougall. Thank you for taking the time to share your experiences with us. Someone once told me that you can never succeed competitively in long distance running unless you train with a professional coach and have the best running shoes. What's your opinion about this?
Boy, there's a lot to unpack in that question. Success and coaches and footwear. I would argue the complete opposite, that if you are focused on those three things, success, coaches, and footwear, you're setting yourself on a path of disappointment. I think that if you begin with personal enjoyment and fun and using what's comfortable as opposed to what is expensive and recommended, and learning about yourself before you are accepting the advice of somebody else, do the exact opposite of that, and I think you're on your way. I think one difficulty we have as athletes is that as soon as we start something, we want to focus on like the finish line. So if today I become a swimmer, my first thought is like, okay, I want to learn to swim 1 lap of the pool. No, you're thinking about, I can't wait until I can swim 2 miles. We try to accelerate the process too much, too quickly, as opposed to starting humbly and joyfully, getting to the point where it's fun and we really like it, and then gradually evolve to the point where when we make the next step, it's because we're ready for it and we need it, as opposed to because someone told us we have to have it.
Thank you very much.
Sure, William.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chris. I've just got 2 questions to finish on. The first one, if you had one golden rule for running, what would it be?
This is something that this great coach named Coach Joe Vigil, who was one of the top athletic coaches in America for decades. And this is a guy that really knew it all. He had coached Olympians and national champions. But when he first saw the Tarahumara run, he saw the one thing he'd never seen before, which was a smile. He was at mile 60 of this 100-mile race, and he's at the top of a very steep embankment, very muddy, very difficult to run up it. And he's at the top looking down, and he sees a group of Tarahumara runners in their sandals coming up this embankment. Now, he'd already seen a bunch of other American runners come up, and they're just grim, and they're tired, and they've got mud on their faces. And then he sees these guys, and they're having a blast. Like, this muddy hill to them is fun. And they're knocking into each other, slapping each other around. And he realized that's the secret. The joy comes first. So really, the one thing, the secret of all of it is find the joy in it first and let everything grow from there.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. And then finally, just to finish on, what advice would you give a teenage Chris McDougall?
Oh, man. All right. I think I'll reveal a lot more about myself than it should be in a public forum. I think the best advice is don't worry. You're not as bad as you think you are. You know, you're not as dumb as you think you are. You're not as much trouble as you think you are. It'll turn out okay. As a teenager, I think I was just hyperactive and uncontrolled, and I was constantly in environments like school and my parents that were trying to tell me what to do, and I didn't want to hear it. And I think for all of us, if you just realize life is long, a lot of things change, and whatever you think is so important and catastrophic right now, it isn't, because in 2 years you're going to forget it even happened. So just suck it up, head toward the light, and you'll be fine.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's fantastic. Thank you for spending the last 30 or so minutes. Really privilege. And I think some of us would be forgiven for thinking that your Born to Run book is about running, about the animals. I think what stands out for me is that you're very much about connection, about people, and about that passion. A message that us as educators and with our students at Scarisbrick Hall School. So thank you very much.
You summarized it That's exactly what I think.
If I jump in there, Chris, can you guys hear me okay still? I'm still here. I am still here. I've been just sat very quietly listening in. It's lovely. Chris, I've got to say thank you very much to all your time in the Global Classroom event and the Q&A. We're going to stitch these things together before we come out of it and make a nice little package out of it in terms of the questions and that side. If it's okay with you, it'd be great to catch up via Zoom at some point to discuss beyond this and just touch base. If you get some time to go through that, that'd be wonderful. And perhaps what we're going to go through in the future. I'm going to get myself some sandals and get out there and do some running. I think actually that sounds good to me. You can do, but not llamas this time. Okay, just running is good.
Okay, all right.
But for us right now, it's in the evening. It's cold outside. For you, it's a beautiful day in Hawaii. So I'll let you crack on, Chris. But we'll be in contact, and I'll reach out to you again if that's okay with you.
Listen, that was a beautiful experience. It was great what you did, and I would be happy to be involved in anything you come up with in the future. You handled this beautifully today. So I was really impressed. I'm happy to be part of it. So please call me for anything, anytime.
Oh, Chris. Have a great day in Hawaii, and thanks very much. Every blessing to you, okay? Take care.
All right. Good. Thanks, guys. See ya. Bye, Jeff.
Bye-bye. For all the students out there, well done. Excellent job. I hope you enjoyed that, found it inspirational. And you can go off and now have your tea if you wish to. I'm still at school, everybody, folks. I'm still literally here in the Oak Room. Everybody else has left, but I'm still here. Mr. Warburton, okay with that?
Yeah, really good. If you're happy with it, I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I'll just see if I can I do a stop recording? I can. Stop recording. Done.